and then, it never works. So,
Okay. And just to let everybody know that we are recording this session here with Joe. Um, just before we start, just a show of hands, who has seen Joe speak live before um, on a stage with his orange outfit?
geez, can't be many. Haven't brought it out in a while.
I have.
You have for sure.
And
Yes.
then Brenda says that you all met about 10 years ago when she was with Pitney
Hi,
Bowes.
Brad. Yeah, it's been a long time.
All right. Well, look, we're probably going to have more people come in as you go. Just wanted to introduce Joe Pulizzi for you. Joe is the founder of content marketing. He didn't necessarily coin the term. That was some journalist back in the 90s, but he was the one that made it popular. He designed the category of content marketing back in 2007 when he got his first company started, which at that time I had a different name, but it turned into the Content Marketing Institute. I first talked to Joe in 2009 when I had another initiative called Latin IT Marketing. I interviewed him about the use of content for companies wanting to enter international markets. And that's pretty much the focus of what I'm doing here at the Custom Software Marketing Institute as well. So Joe was the founder of Content Marketing Institute. He was the founder of The Tilt. And the first it was called the Creator Economy Expo, and then now it's called the Content Entrepreneur Expo. And Joe is now leading what's called Tilt Publishing in conjunction with Lulu, which launches in April. And his big initiative that he is still running is the Content Entrepreneur Expo, which happens in May. If you could plug that a little bit, Joe, that would be great for everybody. I went last year and it was fantastic.
I will absolutely do that. But yes, thank you, Fernando. Oh, we've known each other. Wait, I forgot it was been almost 15 years now. Jeez.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're dating ourselves, my friend. But I wanted to thank everyone for being here. I want to be as helpful as possible. I'm going to share my screen here, Fernando, and get things going.
Yeah,
If we
absolutely.
get this correct, we're doing this. We're sharing that. Make sure. How am I looking? Is that good?
Perfect.
Good. Okay. So if you have questions, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end of this. I'm going to go for 35 or 40 minutes max. And then if you have any kinds of questions at all, put them in the chat, and then Fernando will get to them as we go. But there's the title. We're really going to talk about how you can take your book, your pillar piece of content, and build out an entire content business from it. I'm going to talk a lot about what I've done personally, how it's worked for me, and a lot of other case studies as well. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about are maybe not in line with what you're doing in your industry, whether you're B2B, B2C, nonprofit, whether you have a consulting practice, or whether you're built like a mini media company, or whether you're still at an enterprise and looking to do your own thing. This will be good for really at any stage. Not all of them are going to be great, but I want you to look for the one thing that you can take from this presentation and then enact so you can create your own change and do your own wonderful things. And so I'm just a resource for you moving forward. This is the book. So Get Content, Get Customers is the book that I started writing in 2007, self-published in 2008. McGraw-Hill bought the rights and republished it in 2009. Since then, every 2 years, I published at least one book. Get Content, Get Customers has really morphed into Content Inc. Don't buy Get Content, Get Customers. It's way out of it's old. Nobody wants this. If you wanted what we're going to talk about a lot, and one of my favorite books is Content Inc., and this is the model that we're really going to talk about, where you can take a book and speaking and your platform and really build a multi-million-dollar business out of it. And I'm going to talk to you about how to get there. So as Fernando said, I started this journey. I worked at Penton Media, large business-to-business publisher, starting in 2000. That's where I started to figure out, oh, this content thing's going to be big. There's going to be enterprises out there that are going to need to learn how to create and distribute content. They don't know how to do that right now. It was called custom publishing, custom media, brand journalism, brand publishing in a lot of outlets. Uh, I started calling it content marketing because as I was selling this thing to a lot of enterprises, that's the only thing that they paid attention to. If I said custom publishing, they would fall asleep. Said content marketing, they're like, "Oh, we're a marketer." Just like, I mean, I'm a marketer. I can say this. We're simple people. So search marketing, social media marketing, direct marketing, content marketing. So I really started to push that in 2007. And the whole business, as I was writing this book that would ultimately be the core for the business model, I was doing a lot of speaking. I had that book, I had the consulting, but I'm like, it's all my time. How do I build an asset long term? Because I had this ultimate goal that I wanted to exit. I wanted to create some kind of generational wealth. I didn't want to be on the road all the time. I didn't want to work for the rest of my years. I wanted to do something. So that was 2007 to 2009 was really that thing. And this is where I discovered ultimately this Content Inc. model, which I'll go through a lot of this today. But this is basically what we talk about in the book Content Inc. And this model, I've interviewed hundreds of content entrepreneurs, content creators that have really made this into their full-time business. And this is pretty much the model. I'm going to talk about this moving forward so that you get an idea that you can do this yourself. Ultimately, I'm like, okay, here's the book, Get Content, Get Customers, but I've got to build out something, some kind of immediate property where I can communicate on a regular basis, build an audience, control that audience as much as possible through an email newsletter offering, and then create products and services around that. So that's what we did with Content Marketing Institute. This launched in 2010. And by the way, it was a struggle. It really took 3.5, 4 years from 2007 until I thought I was going to make it. So those of you that are out there that are listening to this that are like, man, I've been in this a year, or 2 years, or 3 years. It sometimes it takes a while. It takes a long time to build a loyal audience that knows, likes, and trusts you. But it really can happen, and you can make it happen. But focus and determination are really, really big. So once we did that and got to say, I got this book property, turned that into Content Marketing Institute. Content Marketing Institute diversified mostly into our event content marketing world. And then you can see the revenues fairly well. We got up to almost 10 million in revenues by 2015. That's when I started the sales process. We had a very good exit, my wife and I, who were the only two employees at the time, and we had 26 wonderful contractors that worked with us as well that were amazing. We're all part of this team. So it worked very well. I'm showing you this because it actually is possible to do this from the start, and that start was this original book that we created. But before I go any further, I need to start with this. And this is what I think separated what we were trying to do, my wife and I, from a lot of other people, is really begin with the end in mind. What do you want to accomplish? Do you want to be a solopreneur for the rest of your life? Do you want to have an exit? Do you want to leave this thing to your kids? Start putting down your goals. It's really important. And for me, it was visualizing the exit. I wrote this down in 2000, I think January 2008. I wrote this thing down in my journal and I reviewed it every day. And I basically did it like I said it like it already happened. I sold my company for $15 million in 2015. Now, ultimately, it happened in 2016. But by reading this, starting in 2000, very audacious, right? To write this down. It's like I had nothing at that. I didn't have two nickels to rub together in 2008. But I visualized this. And because I would read this and internalize this over the years, made lots of decisions, and I'll get to those throughout this presentation that I wouldn't have made if I didn't have this goal. So I don't know what your goal is. I talked to somebody yesterday who was in a mastermind that said, I just want to be a solopreneur for the rest of my days. I said, well, figure out what your perfect day is. And then that's how you're going to get there. You don't have to actually sell. That was my goal. I wanted an actual exit. And you do a little things different, but think about it. Are you going to leave this to your kids? So if that's the case, then you've got to start working that process so they know and get that done legally. And if they even want to work in your business, like who knows? It's really crazy. But I want to start with, I'm going to go step by step. I'm going to spend longer on some of these points that are more important. So the first one is the sweet spot. You should already know your sweet spot, but this is kind of the core content niche that you're starting. First of all, who is the target audience? Specifically, who is that? If you don't know who it is, write it down. And then what is your sweet spot? So, what's your expertise that can stand apart? What's the thing that you know or do that's a little bit better than everyone else? And then on the desire side, what are your customers' desire? What's their wants? What's their needs? What's their pain points? What keeps them up at night? The intersection of that becomes your sweet spot. So start asking yourself these questions so that you can start to put this on paper. Like, what is the biggest problem in their lives? What keeps them up at night? What problem can be fixed with consistent information? You're not including your product and service at this point. Very specifically, this ultimately, if you haven't written your book, this becomes part of the book and then into the content tilt, that differentiation. I'll get to that here. This is the most important part. So if you're going to sign off, wait till I get through this part, and then you can go. I have conversations with content entrepreneurs and have for 15 years, and this is where most go wrong. They don't have a content tilt. I'll give you an example of what that is, and then I'll define it. So let's say that you're going into cloud computing, and that is your content area. Well, don't do what everyone else is doing. And this is happening right now. So if you type in what is cloud computing, you'll find, oh, here's what Oracle's saying. Here's what Amazon's saying. Here's what IBM, Salesforce, and Microsoft. And I could take the content from Microsoft's site and throw it on Amazon's site. You'd never be able to tell the difference. There's no differentiation. It's practically identical content. And most of us make this decision where we're just competing and we're mired in sameness with everyone else that's out there. We need a content tilt. You need to have an area of differentiation where you can break through all that content clutter and actually have a chance to build an audience. You can do that many ways. We'll talk about it, but I want to give you an example. And here's a good one from Anne Reardon. Anne Reardon today is known as the baking queen of Sydney, Australia, but she started as she was working from home. She wanted to start a YouTube vlog, if you will, around food. How many food blogs were out there in 2012? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Well, today she's a multimillionaire. She's got 5 million plus subscribers. She's got multiple cookbooks. It's been tremendously successful around her brand. How to cook that? Well, what's her content tilt? Well, she created things like, look at this amazing, beautiful camera that she created out of chocolate, or look at this 5-pound Snickers bar cake that she made. So if you look at how to cook that, the brand, the content brand in Anne Reardon, okay, so what's the sweet spot? She's a food scientist. She was a dietitian. She understood food really, really well. That was her expertise area. What's her audience's desire? They wanted step-by-step food recipes. Most of us stop there. If she was just going to create any old food recipe, she'd never be able to compete with the Tasties of the world, the BuzzFeeds of the world, the whatever the case is. She'd had to differentiate. Well, no one was doing impossible dessert creations. So if you go to how to cook that, you will find impossible dessert creation over and over again. And that's how she differentiated. That's how she built an audience. And that was her thing. So you have to figure that out for yourself. How can you build a loyal audience based on some kind of a hook? Media companies do this really well. If you look at any media company, they always start with their content tilt and they do it through a mission statement. So if you don't have a mission statement, here's a perfect time. You call it a content mission statement, editorial mission statement. If you come from publishing, that's fine. But let's look at Digital Photography School from Darren Rouse. He's got a really good mission statement right on his About Us page. It says, welcome to DPS, a website with simple tips to help digital camera owners get the most out of their cameras. So here's what you're going to have to do for yourself. If you already wrote a book on that, you should know this, but I want you to write this down. So first of all, what's your core target audience? In this case, digital camera owners. What it's going to be delivered. Simple tips, not long form content, probably bullet point, numbered lists. Most important, what is the outcome for the audience? This is not what you're going to sell. This is what's in it for the audience, helping them get the most out of their cameras. You're trying to help them live a better life, get a better job, something like that. That's the key to this. So you have to figure out, and I would even, Darren launched this site years and years ago. This probably is not niche enough today if he was to launch. He was early to this, years and years ago did this, so it works for him. Like today, giving it for me, if I just launched, I want to launch a how-to site around content marketing for marketing professionals, that is not niche enough. There's 1,000 other companies right now that are doing that. So you have to figure out something, whether that is because of your personality, whether it's because you're going to define your audience differently, whether You're going to define your content niche differently, whatever, or maybe it's a different platform. You can define your content tilts in different ways. An example, let's say you're creating a piece of content like an ongoing show to plant managers. I would say right off the bat, I don't even know what it is, but that's too broad. There's 100,000, maybe a million plant managers around the world. That's too much. You want to go small to start with. You can always broaden out. So I would say, hey, plant managers are companies of 10,000 people or more who outsource to India and China. You get the point, right? You can define it a little bit more on the audience side, a little bit more on the content niche side. You could say, I'm going to deliver a little bit differently, whatever the case is. This is what it looks like. Here's how you're going to take your content and actualize it. You're going to say, okay, who's my target audience? What's my hook, my differentiation? You can define that through your content mission. One content type. Is it audio content, video content, textual plus image? For the most part, you're going to start with that. I'm going to talk about the base in a little bit. And then what platform is your core platform? You don't want to boil the ocean with your content. You want to make sure that you focus on being great at one thing. Because what I want to do, what I want to get you to do is say, okay, if you do the work and you're consistent and you deliver on this platform over and over and over again, can you answer this question in the affirmative? Are you the leading expert in your content niche to your particular audience? If you laugh at that, you probably haven't found your content tilt. You're probably not niche enough. You've got to go the extra mile and make this thing work. You want to get to a point where it's like, yeah, hey, if I do the work, I can actually make this thing happen. So I want to make sure you think about those things. The next one is the base, and we started talking about the base a little bit. What's your home base for your show? What a lot of content creators will do, especially authors coming from, it's like, I built that book. It's like, oh, well, I've got to have the newsletter. I've got to have a podcast. I've got to have a TikTok show. I've got to be on YouTube. I've got to do research. No, 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 you don't. You absolutely don't have to do that at all. So with Content Marketing Institute, when we moved from the book to, okay, what's that platform? We said, well, we're going to do a blog. 3 days. It ended up being 7 days a week, and then it went down to 5 days a week, but we started at 3 days a week. It was just me to start from 2007 to 2009. I was blogging 3 times a week. That was our home base. And then we wanted to make sure those people that got to the blog, they subscribed to the email newsletter, that we had some control ongoing as we went. And it worked really well. So we started ultimately in 2007. It took us a couple of years plus to get to 10,000 subscribers, 4 years to profitability, but around 17 years. Content Marketing Institute is doing really well, even after we sold. So that's fantastic. But we focused on the base being the blog platform. If you look at the content marketing poster child, Red Bull, you might think, look, they're doing all these wonderful things. They're everywhere. They're diversified everywhere. Well, they started with Red Bulletin magazine in 2005. They just did that. They didn't do all the fancy videos, and they didn't have all the different content brands. It took them 2 years to get the monthly, 6 years for US distribution, and they've been around almost 20 years now. But they focused on just creating a great magazine first. And then let's look at a new example, Mr. Beast. You might say, Mr. Beast is everywhere now. Well, he just focused on YouTube. And still to this day, YouTube is his home base. Started in 2012, 3 years just to get to a consistent topic. You know, he's got, I don't know what he's got, almost 200 million people that subscribe to him on YouTube. But in 2016 had 30,000 subs. And that was 4 years in, folks. Takes time. This is difficult. It's basically a war of attrition to make this thing work. So been around for 12 years, net worth, I put 500 million, could be billion, could be more than that. I think Mr. Beast will be one of the top 5 media companies in the world in the next few years, if not already. Authors, like marketers, immediately diversify. Now, I'm not saying you can't be on Twitter X or you can't be on TikTok or Facebook and working on your personal brand. It's fine. But wherever your show is, wherever your thing is, where you're delivering that quality, consistent information around your content niche, you want to make sure you do the one thing. And I call this focusing on your content energy. And again, I always use chocolate in my presentations. Here's another chocolate. But I want you to think of it this way. You have minimal resources. Here is the total amount of content energy you have to disperse for all the content creation that you want to do. And every company is like that. We all have limited resources, time, and attention. And what most authors will end up doing, they'll say, oh, well, I'm going to put some to the blog, and then or online content, and then I'll do a podcast, and I'll put a little bit to this research, and I'll have a really bad e-newsletter, and I'll be mediocre at social, and maybe I'll do this little event. That's what most of us do. It's the wrong way to do it. This is what you got to do. If you want to be great, if you want to be the leading informational expert in your niche, you've got to take that content. And by the way, that's all the same number of little content bits I counted. So make sure you say, oh, I'm going to have an amazing email newsletter and the best podcast show to my niche on the planet. This is how we make it work until you build that minimum viable audience. And for us at Content Marketing Institute, it was 10,000 email subscribers. So we didn't want to diversify until we got to that 10,000. And when we did that, that's when we launched Content Marketing World, the event, or Chief Content Officer, the magazine, or This Sold Marketing, the podcast, which is in its 11th year now. So those types of things. So those are the first three. So now you've done all the things. Now you're going into major audience building. And I want you to take sort of a piece of and see what like a media company like the New York Times has done when they look at building their audience. Everything works with them around vertical email. That's why email is the most critical thing that you can do. And yes, they're prolific on social, but all the goal of all of their social media properties is ultimately to get people to subscribe for an email newsletter and make that work. And again, back to Content Marketing Institute model, like we got to that. So we launched CMI, we got to the 10,000 subscribers, and then we went and diversified into all these other things up to 2015, the other circle where we got to 150,000 subscribers. So I'm just saying, if you're going to make this work, you have your show, wherever that's at, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, a podcast, an event series, a webinar series, a newsletter, whatever that book series, whatever that is. You're building audience through your email newsletter is kind of the other thing that you're doing, even though you might be using lots of different social media, because we all have this, what I call a rent to own strategy. Everything else outside of your email or a membership that you would create, it's all rented land. You're at the will of these other platforms to distribute your content. They can kick you off at any time. Whatever the algorithm changes they make, you can't do anything with them. So you're waking up today, you have them. So great. But what are you going to use them for? My whole goal with all these other channels is to get or keep a subscriber. That's what I want to do. So whether that's for my YouTube channel or whether my podcast, I ultimately want people to subscribe to my email, and you want to always move up the hierarchy. So a Facebook fan to me is not worth very much. An email subscriber is worth a ton. So that's what I want to continue to move up. So if you have a YouTube show, make sure a call to action is to get them to your email newsletter. To do that, you have to have a remarkable email newsletter. Is your newsletter truly remarkable? And be honest with yourself. So I don't know what age you are, but if you're around my age, you probably watched Cheers in your lifetime, bought a bar in Boston, and there's Norm Peterson. I want your newsletters to be like Norm Peterson. Norm showed up on time every time to that bar. And when he did, he always had something interesting to say. That's your newsletter. So if you're going to deliver every Friday morning, you deliver every Friday morning ongoing, and you don't stop. Because once you stop that distribution, you've broken your promise, your content promise, and you might never get that person back again. So think about what is in your newsletter, and is there something unique and different that's in that newsletter that they can't find anywhere else? And if you see, like the whole goal of this is my new site, joepulizzi.com. My whole goal with joepulizzi.com is to get and keep a subscriber. That is my one call to action. So yes, I do lots of things these days. I have books. I do a lot of speaking. I have 2 podcasts. I have a foundation. Great. But my number one thing, call to action on everything, is the newsletter. So think about, and yeah, so I'm an author. Very important to me. But I don't just want them to buy my book. Now, if my book is a gateway to get them to subscribe to my newsletter, that's fantastic. But I really want to get them to subscribe because I feel if I can build a relationship with them ongoing and they allow this through an opt-in relationship, then they become to know, like, and trust me, and then they will end up buying stuff from me, and that will fuel your business model going forward. And if you see the individual, you, the author individual, is different from your brand. So here's a really good one. So Jay Klaus, I get an email. I'm subscribed to Jay's email, Creator Science. Creator Science is the content brand, kind of like Ann Reardon's How to Cook That. That's the content brand, but it comes from the individual. So you send your newsletter, like Joe Pulizzi. I send my newsletter from Joe Pulizzi. It's called Orange Letter, but your content brand and your personal brand is different. So that ultimately you have an asset you can sell. If I would have started in 2010 and named it Joe Pulizzi Consulting, I wouldn't have anything to sell because I'm tied to everything. With Content Marketing Institute, I could slowly over time pull myself out of operations and say, this is not the Joe Show, and have actually something that I could sell ongoing. Dan Runcie is another good one. From Dan Runcie, the content brand is Trapital. So focus on email. That is your core audience building. I want to, like, your calls to action in your bios and social media, hopefully will link to your email newsletter. Now we're getting into revenue. You're like finally getting into some revenue. And here's your model. Here's the model we use for Content Marketing Institute. Here's the model you're ultimately going to use, but you're not going to do these all at once. So once you build a loyal audience, you ultimately have 10 ways that you can drive revenue. Now, the four on the, I'm going to talk about some of the ones in the middle. The four on the outside, these are content marketing goals. So if you are an Autodesk or you're an Apple or something like that, you're going to say, hey, I create this content. I'm creating this video series because I want to sell more products, or I want to sell more services, or I want to keep my customers more loyal, or I want to create better yield and sell them at a higher price or more profitable, whatever the case is. Those are more content marketing, and you can have those as part of yours. A lot of you might have consulting business. Great. But focusing on the inside ones like advertising, this is the lowest hanging fruit. So once you build this property, the show, whatever it is, and you have the newsletter, you can do what we did. The Tilt, after Content Marketing Institute, ended up launching the Tilt as a platform specifically for content creators and content entrepreneurs. Our first lowest hanging fruit revenue generation method was we're going to integrate advertising. In this case, it was sponsored from ConvertKit or a conference and event. Fernando, you told me to talk about CEX, Content Entrepreneur Expo. If you're interested in what I'm talking about, you should come, cex.events. My personal code is JP100. JP100 will save you $100. It's May 5th through 7th. But part of the Tilt, and then we're like, oh, okay, well, how do we generate more revenue? Then we diversified into CEX. We didn't do that until we got to about 10,000 email subscribers. I wanted to get that base going, that minimum viable audience. Today, now we've got BJ Novak and Justin Welsh and Latasha James and a bunch of wonderful people talking exactly about what we're talking about today. Premium content, talk to you about the books. So I'm selling print and audiobook and email. That's driving. That's the difference in this model versus a traditional author's model. Because if I was just talking about the author's model, authors, for the most part, make their money off the books. That is not my goal. Last year, I think we did over 100,000 in revenue just off of book sales, because I've got a lot of books out there, audio and physical books, which is fantastic, which is wonderful. But ultimately, this was not the goal. These were extensions and diversifications of the overall business model. This becomes just one lever that you can end up pulling. So I don't want you to think about this is the only authors. We're thinking too small. We want to think like we're building a whole media property as we go, or maybe affiliate marketing. If you look at another author, John Lee Dumas, he created a podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire, EO on Fire. And a big portion of his revenue comes from affiliate links moving forward. So that's another way that we can generate revenue. Or maybe it's subscriptions. So if you look at somebody like a Duct Tape Marketing, another author, John Jantz is a wonderful author. He created a fractional CMO system where he sets this up and sells subscriptions and membership moving forward. So lots of different ways and things that you can do to take the model to the next level. And then, of course, there might be services. My co-host and friend Robert Rose on This Old Marketing Podcast, if you listen to that, he has got a whole consulting operation that he launches. So he's done this whole thing as an author himself, but then he drives revenue mostly through consulting services. I would say that when you do this and when you're making the decision is don't go forward, like figure out your content tilt, figure out your go-to-market strategy from what your base should be. Ask yourself if there's money. If people subscribe to my stuff, is there enough money? Do they have enough money to spend on the thing? If Are there sponsors that would actually want to reach the audience of people that you're building? So I would think about that thing first. So if you get into an area, and I'm just thinking about knitting, not that knitting's not profitable, but I just thought about knitting or chocolate or whatever the case is. Say, hey, if I build 10,000 chocolate lovers, can you monetize that? The answer is probably no. That's why the bigger opportunity is in niches, especially on a B2B side. Not that there's anything wrong with consumer, but break yours down like Ann Reardon did into a niche that you can actually monetize and then go after sponsors that want to reach that particular niche. Two more, and then we'll get some questions. Then now you can get into diversification. And a really good example of that is Morning Brew. So if you look at Morning Brew, I've been subscribed to Morning Brew since they launched. It's like, oh, okay, great. I get an overview of the news every day. This is a different way. That was their differentiation. And they did it in sort of a quirky manner. And they focused on just email for the longest time. They built a core audience and then they started their podcast and then they started their training program. And now they do events and now they do all the things, but they just started doing the one thing first. So don't be so anxious to diversify into all the things. Focus and make sure that core offering that you have is amazing, and then you go ahead and diversify. You may think that this is something that you can't do, but this is, and I've done it, and it works really well, is there's a buyer build scenario. It's very hard to build all these things, but I come from publishing, and in publishing, I was always taught, hey, is there an opportunity to buy this thing before you go ahead and build it? Really, really important. And we did that at Content Marketing Institute. So remember, I had my overall goal. I want to create a $15 million exit event in 2015. And so in 2013, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get there organically. What do I do? It's like, well, I think we need an awards program. I found Magnum Opus Awards Program was the leading awards program around this area of custom publishing, content marketing. We purchased that for not that much money. We renamed it Content Marketing Awards, and it added millions of dollars to the final price, and it was a really good extension. And we integrated with all the stuff we were doing. We wanted a West Coast event. I said, well, let's not launch a West Coast event ourselves. It'd take us 2-3 years to get going. Let's shorten that cycle. We bought Intelligent Content Conference. We renamed it Content Tech, and it worked really well for us moving forward. So these things, and by the way, I keep my little list of okay, well, who are my competitors in my content niche? What are the YouTubers around my content niche? Podcasters, newsletters providers, and make a list of those people. And ultimately, you could say, well, maybe I want to do a partnership program with them. Maybe I want to get to know them better. Maybe you want to go to an event and meet those people because ultimately you might be able to partner with them or maybe buy. And by the way, some of these things are very small deals. When I say small, they're like $10,000, $15,000 that you can get into. And when you're throwing off $1 million or $2 million, you're going to need to have these things going. So I want you to start now, no matter if even if you're a beginner, you want to start making the list now of, oh, here's my content mission statement. But at the same time, here's where when I diversify, I might be able to buy these things instead of creating them organically. And the last one is, what's your exit? Back to the beginning with the end in mind. What do you want to do? This is really important. You want to ask yourself this every day. What do you ultimately want to do? You want to build this big enterprise? I did not. That's why we kept it 2 employees with contractors. And when we got to the almost 10 million in number, that was a number that, we to go from there, we'd have to go to like, hey, were you a mid-size media company? Like what? I didn't want to get into that. I wanted to sell before that. That's too many working parts. It's a whole nother side of the business I didn't want to learn. So you figure out that's why, like, what is your exit plan? What does it look like? What is your best life? What are your financial goals, your spiritual goals, your career goals, your athletic goals, like all those things? You should figure out what you want to do. And this is a key part of it moving forward because here's your timetable. And this is in general, it's not for everyone. But as you start this out, when I interviewed a lot of the content entrepreneurs for Content Inc., started to figure out what timetable. And so basically, you're getting into 12-month mark, you're building out your base. You're starting to build that audience. That 18-month mark is when you really start to get into, hey, I have an opportunity to generate some revenues. That's sort of no, you don't want to wait till 18 months, by the way. You want to try to drive revenue as soon as possible, but sometimes you don't have the audience where you can sell sponsorships or create events or do things that actually generate revenue. So it takes some time. And this whole thing, as you see, you've got 18 months. So you're talking about almost 5 years here that it takes. And that's 3 to 5 years is when you get into the, yeah, I think I can make this thing. And from 2000, like I didn't know we started this thing in 2007. I really didn't know we had a thing until 2011. It was a little over 4 years. So again, a lot of content creators out there, there's a lot of them that give up. And I don't want you to do that. So whatever you need to do with your expenses, go to one car. Maybe can't take the vacation. Um, maybe think a little bit differently about all the streaming services you have so that you can lower your expenses so you can make this thing moving forward. So before we get to much else, I want you to think about these things. Like, are you specific enough with your audience? Have you created your content mission statement? You'll maybe identify some areas of weakness there. How can you truly be different? What is your content tilt? Think about all the things that you can create as part of your show that is differentiated. And then back to your content energy, you're probably doing some things that aren't additive to this business model. So you're going to have to kill some things. And like for me, I knew that Content Marketing Institute would not be successful if I kept on doing consulting. Making clients happy takes a lot of time. I know a lot of you do consulting. So I had to kill a lot of those things. I ended up outsourcing all that to Robert Rose. He took all the consulting for CMI so I could focus on building the business and doing events and writing and all the things that I felt that I could add more to the business going forward. So again, my call to action from here, if I was to ask you to do something, I'd love for you to go to CEX. So again, JP100 is the code for that. Go to cex.events. I would love to see you there. I hope you got one thing. I want you to think about what that one thing is, and I want you to take that one thing and maybe journal it, write it down, say this is the thing I can do, or maybe that's around your content tilt and your mission statement about where you can get more focused so you can take this and take that book concept or whatever your content mission is and build that into a large mini media property. All right. How's that, Fernando?
That was great. I can't believe how fast you went through this, but yet how comprehensive as well as understandable it was. So I think you've done this a few times, I think.
Well, this is my life too. I live this. And the one thing that I did want to say is a lot of people will say, "Oh man, you did it at the right time, or you picked the right area, or it was easy for you." I mean, I remember 2009. You probably remember this. 2009, I was going to give up on the whole thing because we weren't making
Yeah.
any kind of money with the old model, and it was only when we pivoted to the Content Marketing Institute model and really building this thing out from the pieces parts that I had out there that made all the difference. So that's why I really believe in this model.
It's so funny because when I interviewed you for my first blog back at 2009, I didn't know that you were going through this stuff because you had this air of self-assurance and that you knew what you were talking about. It's like, you never know what's going on with people, you just
You fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there you
So look, I
go.
want to open up the floor to questions and feel free to, unmute and turn on your camera for questions. Let's make this as interactive as possible. We have Joe up until the top of the hour. So Kevin Coyne from Tech Ranch here in Austin, Texas.
Woohoo.
Yeah, thanks. It was actually, I had a bunch of questions because I've been doing, I get the sense that I'm one of the original gangsters of the whole entrepreneurial movement here in Austin. Been leading, helping entrepreneurs for 20 years. I also started the Austin's first co-working space and did a bunch of trainings, travel around the world. My question is a little bit more about there's something I mean, Fernando has actually encouraged me many, many, many times to be launching content. And I'm dyslexic. So one of the things that I've kind of resisted it just because me on a keyboard is kind of difficult. But me in front of 400 people, that's easy. That would just getting your sense about like what a guy like me should do. I definitely have I've been in 28 countries in the last 7 years. Each one of those was an invite from usually a foreign government to talk about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So I got the space, but there's some kind of missing part for me that I don't that maybe you could, just because you're an expert, you'd actually see about what I should change. But like
So,
I know it, and I know a part of it's just my mind space.
And Kevin
well,
does regular webinars too.
Yeah, Kevin, I don't think that I'm not saying that everyone has to have text as their core. It sounds like you're really not, you don't want to write, doesn't want something you want to stay away from, but your base can, it's kind of like Harry Potter's sorting hat. I like to say you get a say. Even though you might think that it makes sense to do a text e-newsletter, you have a say in what your base is. So it would be, sounds like it's a webinar program or a YouTube show or whatever it is sort of the core base. And your situation is not too dissimilar from Michael Stelzner. Michael started Social Media Examiner, Social Media Marketing World. Michael's dyslexic and really was staying away from as much writing as possible, but started basically, he hired a lot of really smart people to that were really good writers, like I did. Like Michelle Lynn, even though I wrote some of the blogs, Michelle Lynn was the editor of Content Marketing Institute. She was the driving force, and we used to have 4 or 5 guest writers a week that I didn't even touch. So that was great. So that was one of the Tilt newsletter when we relaunched. Did this whole thing again with the Tilt, and Ginn handled all the editorial. I didn't do anything. So maybe it's to figure out. It sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing things, Kevin, and so figure out where you can make the most value, the things that you like to do the most, and then all the other things, which I do really believe that most of us need a great e-newsletter. You don't have to do that yourself. You can outsource that to anyone. They can take stuff that you're talking about on a podcast or a webinar or a YouTube or whatever and put that into kind of the core of what your email newsletter is. So if that's kind of what you're fearful of, I think you're okay.
But it's interesting that we've had difficulties in the past. I mean, I haven't actually. Let me switch to a different question. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone else that's going to ask questions, but I've got a lot of them because I'm right at the cusp. I'm like, okay, I know this is the answer. Would you say more about one of the things that we all know is the guerrilla business. You got to kill like 80% of what you're doing. You mentioned it about you gave up the consulting and stuff like that. Was there any way that you tested what you were going to stop doing?
So I during that time, I normally would write down what am I good at and what do I like doing? And what am I not good at and what do I don't like doing? And I would put that down. And anything I was not good at and I didn't like doing, I'm like, I gotta outsource this ASAP because I will be miserable. I mean, this is doing this whole thing, as you know, being an entrepreneur. I mean, we're all crazy, right? To launch our own business. So we got a little bit of crazy in us. But I was okay at consulting, but I hated doing it. And it was taking a majority of my time. So I knew right away that was number one that I had to get rid of. The other thing I was spending way too much time figuring accepting negotiating speaking deals, and setting appointments. Well, thankfully, I outsourced all of that, and I had to let completely go of those. Those are the first 2 things that I did. That Content Marketing Institute would have never happened if I didn't do that. I don't know what yours are, but I would absolutely do that list and say, what do I not like, or what am I not adding to the business, or what am I not good at, and outsource that stuff immediately to somebody else.
And when you say outsourcing, are you saying like it's still within your business view, or you're just finding someone else that anytime a lead like that comes in, you're totally handing off to like another principal?
It could, however you set it up. I mean, the way that we set it up with Robert Rose had his own company called the Content Advisory, but we said at Content Marketing Institute that we worked exclusively with the Content Advisory. So what we would do is I would then send that lead over to Robert, and we were done. Robert would close it, and then whenever he would bill anything, we would get a kickback. That's how we set it up, and that worked really well. Like if you wanted to go and 1099 it with somebody else, there's lots of ways to set it up, right? I just needed to make sure that yes, I still wanted to get some compensation from it, but I don't want to spend 2 seconds on that business. That was not going to grow. I was trying to figure out, how do we create a business that had a certain multiple so I could sell for a certain amount of money, and consulting is a terrible business when it comes to multiples. So I'm like, okay, I want to build an event. I want to build a subscription program. I want to build training, whatever those things that we could sell, and then I could accomplish my goals.
Yeah, I'm
And
so glad. I'm so glad Kevin was able to actually come on here because I've been, like he said, I've been talking to him about this kind of stuff, and but when Joe Pulizzi comes, it's like he's now getting it from the
I'm
horse's mouth.
probably saying the same thing you're saying, Fernando, right? But it's tough. It's not easy. I mean, I especially at the time, consulting was the core business. And I'm like, that's how we're keeping the lights on. But I'm like, oh, if I'm gonna have to do, I'm gonna have to make this risk and do it. And it was a great decision.
it's been interesting because we've been one of the things that I'm, not that I feel like I'm old, but as I've, you know, aged a little bit, I'm like, some of the stuff that we do with certain governments, which is essentially a consulting kind of gig, I'm like, okay, maybe it makes sense. I mean, I know all about building entrepreneurial ecosystems, and I'm thinking, okay, instead of me sitting in front of someone or having that consulting gig, I can just build the content and just, I'd still like to go speak about it, and but the main thing is uh, dealing with governments is a pain in the you know what. And we've done, and I don't mean if someone saw this recording from any one of our customers, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm a startup guy. I'm not a patient guy. Um, and but now I'm kind of looking for, I want to do something. I want to continue to build my own business, but I want to do it in a different way. I want a lot more leverage than I have right now.
So it
So
sounds like there's an opportunity. But yeah, sounds like some tough decisions to make. But you probably already know what those are. It sounds like.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So like tagging on to Kevin, because Kevin he does a lot of work with foreign governments as well as international and foreign companies. And given the fact that my company, the one organizing this event, the Custom Software Marketing Institute, by the way, kind of stole that institute idea from CMI. So my goal over here is essentially help a company enter the U.S. market by identifying an area where they can make an impact, maybe design a new category, write a book about it, and then use that as leverage to enter the U.S. market by getting on stages, podcasts, et cetera. You've been invited to speak all over the world. Maybe as many countries around the world as Kevin. What can you talk about in terms of this model as it applies to entering foreign markets?
so yeah, my first speaking event outside the country was 2000 February 2009 in Brussels, Belgium, and the reason I got that was because of the book. Because I was able to position myself as sort of this innovative person, expert around content marketing. And that's why, by the way, I have this belief that every 2 years you sort of refresh that book and come up. Like I've written a lot, I've written 8 different books, but essentially it's all the same book, except for my novel. But all the other ones are essentially the play on the other one. And we're like just taking the next information and going that way forward. I've probably done, I don't know, 50 or 60 gigs outside the country, all paying gigs. And none of them I reached out for. They were all inbound leads. And that's where, by the way, and if you want to look at the Joe Pulizzi site, I've set that up along, over the years so that it would maximize speaking opportunities coming from the book. But what happens is, interesting enough, is if you set yourself as the expert, somebody from overseas, like we have a lot of overseas people on that email list, and then they get my stuff every other week. And then naturally, I just get somebody emailing me and says, Joe, we got an event coming up, so and so. Can you come over? And I send it over to Pam, who handles all my speaking things. And then they pay the rate and I'm there. It's not rocket science. It's just setting yourself up as that expert. And that's why, Fernando, I would say focus on that content tilt and differentiation area where you feel you could be the leading expert in the world. I asked myself that question and said, oh, in 2007, 2008, if I do this thing, if I figure out, could I be one of the leading experts in content marketing, especially for enterprises, if I do all these things? And I said, I think I can. Not a lot of people talking about it. Not a lot of people talking about it that way. Not a lot of people writing books about it. Not a lot of people speaking about it. So that's where there's that same opportunity exists. It's just in a different niche to a different audience today. So yeah, internationally, absolutely. I think that my books have been um, translated, I don't know, 20 or 30 different languages around the world. So yes, absolutely. That's the easiest way to go without
Yeah.
having a strategy to how I go overseas. You say, well, just become the leading expert here and do all the things we're talking about, and it should naturally occur.
Thank you so much, Joe. Brenda, you have a question.
I've always been told whenever someone says, "Hey, turn your video on and ask a question," you take advantage of that opportunity. Joe, it's such a delight to see you live, and I haven't seen you forever. I apologize for being fresh-faced. I have more of a technical question.
Sure.
What camera do you use for your webinars? Because you look like TV movie quality on screen right now. Just curious.
Thank you. This is a state-of-the-art Sony camera that I have, and I'm Fernando. I will send you the specs on that so you could share it with the audience on the way. Just so you know, we with the podcast This Old Marketing. We were doing Robert Rose and I were doing, both on the same screen, and I got probably notes from 7 or 8 audience members said, Joe, you got to up your camera game like you have. And I felt horrible about the whole thing. And I'm like, and then finally I said, Robert, I need help. Help me. And he um, sent me kind of the overview and say, here's what you need to do. And I'm a technical guy, I think, but I had to get my son's help to set this whole thing up. It took me about 6 hours. I got the Elgato lights in front of me. I got the backlighting going. I got the camera. I've got the additional storage. So everything's working. So it probably cost me about $2,000 all in to really make this a go. And that's what you're seeing today. And it's been a game changer. I cannot tell you how important that is. So if you're regularly on screen like I am, I'm usually doing at least one interview a day. It makes I did an interview with Simon Owens yesterday, and he's in the creator economy, and he got on he's just using a webcam, and he said, "Oh my God, I got to upgrade my system." I'm like, "I've been there, Simon. I just got yelled at by a couple of people in my community to up my game." So there you go.
Well, thanks. It's good to see you again, Joe. Thank you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the question.
Was there any process that you used for pricing? Like I'm from a different world, so I don't know about your background, but I'm just about to own your book and
Oh, thank you.
subscribe to your podcast. So thank you for that. I'm just wondering, what was your discovery process for the things that you were capturing revenue with around? What was your discovery process for deciding how to price those items?
Um, so I did a lot of research on similar marketing newsletters and similar marketing websites. I probably had 30 media kits from what I would consider competitors so I could get a feel. You definitely don't want to do anything cost per thousand CPM. You want to do it where you're creating your own sponsorship. And the way that I price, and by the way, if you're getting Content Inc., I go through I came up with this thing called the benefactor package where I'm basically stealing from all sorts of other things. But I go through and say, I created a sponsorship. It's a site sponsorship where we put the logo on the site where you get email newsletter sponsorship, you get insight into the community. So I built this kind of fuzzy sponsorship so people could never do apples to apples. And that's where I think the opportunity, and you want to make it exclusive. Though we funded Content Marketing Institute before, like I had no money, Kevin, at all. Yeah, two nickels to rub together. I'm like, how do I get Content Marketing Institute off the ground? So I went to 5 companies and I said, hey, I need $10,000. Here's what you're going to get. You're going to get 20% of the inventory on the email. Your logo is going to be on the bottom of every page of our website. We ultimately expanded it to 10 companies. They were paying $15,000 a year. It was great to start a year with $150,000 every year and just say, good, we have that working capital that we could deploy smartly. So that's what I would say. Like, look at that benefactor package. And by the way, it's like probably in a million places online. If you type in like Joe Pulizzi benefactor package, I've written about it a ton. But let me know if you can't find it. I'll send it to you. But it's also in the book when I talk about generating revenue. So that's what I would say. It's sort of like a fuzzy sponsorship package. It's also exclusive. And I love that. But I did do a lot of research before pricing it to say, okay, I want something low enough, but also high enough where they actually think there is some value there. The more you give stuff away, value add for free, they'll never pay for anything. You've got to start right away and put something at a high enough price where it's a little uncomfortable for him.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, no,
Cool.
it's interesting because of my B2B background. And since it's, this is more B2C, I've got to relearn a whole different way of thinking.
Well, no, I mean I think it's more B2B, Kevin, actually. I mean this whole thing I learned is a business to business publishing model. So it's modeled after B2B media companies. It's just, I mean, you're targeting, I know what you're saying, it's like B2C, but the person that you're probably targeting is within a business. So it's a consumer within a business. So I would
Yeah,
still
it's just
consider that
for me,
B2B.
my background is like more enterprise sales where you're selling like the package that you're selling is starting at 100,000, maybe, half a million or something like that. And now like thinking, okay, $100 at a time or whatever it might be.
I would think still keep thinking big. Man, those you're still targeting those people that are making those big buys. It's just, who are they and how are you targeting them? I think, but I don't know. Fernando, do we have some other questions? I don't know.
Yeah, I had one more question before we finish. What could you speak quickly to your book launch process?
So it has changed a lot. We don't have a ton of time, but when I first started in 2007 and I wrote Get Content, Get Customers with Newt Barrett, we published it in 2008. It was all self-publishing. We leveraged Amazon at the time, I think Create Space or whatever it was called. So we self-published the whole thing. And then we were lucky because we did an ebook promoting the book. McGraw-Hill got a copy of that ebook and then bought the rights to that. And then I became a McGraw-Hill publisher. And now I'm going back, like my novel, The Will to Die, was self-published, and my next book coming out, which I actually probably can't even show that. I just got this is the new book coming out called The Content Entrepreneur. This will be out. We're launching it at CEX. It's a group. It's 33 authors. It's our little mastermind group that put that together. But I'm very excited about that. That we're changing the process to go direct. And and this is the whole thing with Tilt Publishing, the new thing that I'm launching. What we're trying to do is say, look, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, they're great. We want to use them for discovery. We want to make sure that if people want to buy our stuff in that way, that it's available. But what has happened over the years, and I've done this, unfortunately, I would say, oh, great, I've got lots of thousands of people that follow me, and I send my book link to Amazon. And when people buy off of Amazon, Amazon keeps all the data and keeps all the profit except for maybe a buck or less than that if it's an ebook or whatever. I don't get any of that. It's like, why are we doing that? So this whole new model is the way the content entrepreneur will be set up is you'll go to the Joe Pulizzi site or you go to the CEX site and you'll say, here's how to buy directly from us. We print on demand through Lulu and they can buy it directly from us. It comes from us in the post. I can set whatever price I want. So if each cost, let's say it costs $5 or $7 to print that thing, I can set the price at 20, 25, $30. I get the profit from that and I get the data. So we don't want to give Amazon all our data. It's like I talked about this whole thing called rented land, and I've been on that bandwagon, as you know, Fernando, for years. But yet, for my book publishing, I was saying, "Oh, give all your data to Amazon." And they've got enough data. They've got all the data that they want. That's not so. It's fine for discovery, but let's make sure that we send our fans, our followers, our subscribers to buy directly from us that can build this content model. So that's where it's changed. So now all my printing will be print on demand, and they can buy the ebook. They can buy all that stuff directly from my site, and then the other stuff I'll use for discovery only.
I love it. I love it. And before we close, if you could talk about anything that you want to talk about, maybe Tilt Publishing or CEX, anything more that you want to say about that?
So uh we decided to launch. So hey Sharon, you got the book. All right. I love it. That's awesome. The We're launching Tilt Publishing in April. We're launching it specifically for content creators and content entrepreneurs. And what we found out is that there's so many out there that have a finished manuscript but can't take it the rest of the 10%. They need it edited, they need it designed, they need it laid out, they need help with marketing. So what we're going to do is launch Tilt Publishing to say, you got a finished manuscript, you're the leading expert in your niche, but you don't want to learn all the stuff. And it's a lot. It can be a little bit overwhelming with it, but Fernando, you've worked on the book process. You do this. There's a lot of stuff that's there. We're going to help take it home. So for a minimal amount of money, and we're working on the pricing, but it's not that much money, we will help you set that up, because what we want you to do is we're really trying to sell this sell direct thing, where we'll set it and we don't take any royalties or anything. All we want you to do is sell direct. If you sell copies off your site, that'll help us, because Lulu will end up printing them. So that works out for us. So that's the new Tilt Publishing imprint. We've got 4, 5, 6 people signed up so far as beta customers. And so we'll see in April. I think it's going to be a good service, because I'm finding out that a lot of content entrepreneurs don't want to spend the time to figure out, how do I do that last leg? So we're going to finish it for them.
I have a quick question. So Lulu, you're working with Lulu.com?
Lulu Press. Yes.
I've heard of them. They've been around a long time.
They have since 2000. They were the OG.
I think I've worked with them before, like way back when, because I started as a graphic designer, and so I've had a lot of print work, and then I've done photography. So when I heard Lulu, I said, I know them.
You know them. Absolutely. Yeah. So
That's great, Joe.
Yeah. So so Lulu became a sponsor of CEX 2 years ago when we launched CEX. I didn't even know they were interested in the category.
Wow.
And they're really focusing on content entrepreneurs and content creators as one of their core audiences. So that's why they bought CEX. They bought the Tilt from us. And now we're launching as a partnership this idea of Tilt Publishing. So we're pretty excited about it.
I love it. I've been wanting to ask about that. So now I had the opportunity. Thank you.
There you go. And thanks for buying the book. I appreciate it.
I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm so excited about the book. I'm so excited. I've known about you for years, and this is kind of like, you're a rock star.
Oh, please don't.
Probably just
Well, no, it's just you're an expert in this area, and you have so much knowledge, and I appreciate you getting on here and sharing it. So thank you.
Thank you. I just love that. I love doing it. I mean, I really believe in this model. I believe it's the best business to get into, this idea of content creation and content entrepreneurship. So I'm glad everyone was here.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I just wanted to thank you, Joe, so much for your generosity with your time. And I know we could probably keep you here for another hour with questions, but you've got things to do, people to see, food to eat. And so I'll be sending a recording of this to everybody involved. And also you can go to the Tesla Software Marketing Institute YouTube channel, and it'll be there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Fernando. It's been great. Our friendship has meant a lot to me. I appreciate all the support. So
JoePulizzi.com, right?
JoePulizzi.com for all my personal stuff, find out about me, my email newsletter, and then CEX.events for CEX May 5th through 7th in Cleveland. I hope to see everyone there.
I hope to too.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.